21 lessons for the 21st century, meaning the identity portfolio. The ancient Egyptian, Canaanite, and Greeks hedged their bet when it came to sacrifice. They had many gods, and if one failed, they hoped that another would still come through. So they sacrificed to the sun god in the morning, to the earth goddess at noon, and to mix with a lot of fairy and demon in the evening. That too hasn't changed much. All the stories and God in which people believe today, be they Yahweh and Mammon, the nation or the revolution, are incomplete, full of holes, and riddles with contradiction. Therefore, people rarely put their entire faith in a single story. Instead, they keep a portfolio of several stories and several identities, switching from one to the other as the need arises. Such cognitive dissonance are inherent in almost all the society and movement. Consider a typical Tea Party supporter who somehow scares ardent faith in Jesus Christ with firm objection to governmental welfare policy and staunch support for the National Rifle Association. Wasn't Jesus' message focused on helping the poor rather than arming yourself to the teeth? The B-point there seem incompatible, but the human brain has a lot of drawer and compartment, and some neurons just don't talk to one another. Similarly, you can find plenty of Bernie Sanders supporters who have a vague belief in some future revolution, while also believing in the importance of investing their money wisely. They can easily switch from discussing the unjust distribution of wealth in the world to talking about the performance of their Wall Street portfolios. Hardly anyone has just one identity. Nobody is just a Muslim, or just an Italian, or just a capitalist. But every now and then, a fanatical creed comes along and insists the people should believe in only one story and have only one identity. In recent generation, the most fanatic such creed was fascism. Fascism insists the people should not believe any story except the nationalist story and should have no identity except their national identity. Not all nationalists are fascist. Most nationalists have great faith in the story of their nation and emphasize its unique merit and the unique obligation they have toward it. But they nevertheless acknowledge that there is more to the world than just their nation. I can be a royal Italian with special obligation towards the Italian nation and still have other identity. I can also be socialist, Catholic, a husband, a father, a scientist, and a vegetarian, and each of these identity entail additional obligation. Sometimes several of my identity pull me in different direction, and some of my obligation come into conflict with one another. But who said life was easy? Fascism is what happens when nationalism wants to make life too easy for itself by denying all other identity and obligation. There has been a lot of confusion lately about the exact meaning of fascism. People call almost anyone they don't like a fascist. The term in the danger of degenerating into all-purpose term of abuse. So, what does it really mean? In brief, while nationalism teaches me that my nation is unique and that I have a special obligation toward it, fascism says that my nation is supreme, that I owe my nation exclusive obligation. I should never prefer the interest of any group or individual over the interest of my nation, no matter what the circumstances are. Even if my nation stands to make but a paltry profit from inflicting much misery on millions of strangers in a far-off land, I should have no qualm about supporting my nation. Otherwise, I am a despicable traitor. If my nation demands that I kill millions of people, I should kill millions. If my nation demands that I betray truth and beauty, I should betray truth and beauty. How does fascists evaluate art? How does fascists know whether a movie is a good movie? Very simple. There is just one yardstick. If a movie serves the national interest, it's a good movie. If the movie does not serve the national interest, it's a bad movie. And how does a fascist decide what to teach kids in school? He used the same yardstick. Teach the kids whatever serves the interest of the nation. The truth does not matter. This worship of the nation is extremely attractive, not only because it simplifies many difficult dilemmas, but also because it causes people to think that they belong to the most important and most beautiful thing in the world, their nation. The horrors of the Second World War and the Holocaust indicate the terrible consequence of this line of thinking. Unfortunately, when people talk of the ills of fascism, they often do a poor job because they tend to depict fascism as a hideous monster while failing to explain what's so seductive about it. That's why people today sometimes adopt fascist idea without realizing it. People think I was taught that fascism is ugly, and I look in the mirror, I see something very beautiful, so I cannot be a fascist. It should be like the mistake Hollywood movie make when they depict the bad guys. Voldemort, Lord Sauron, Darth Vader, as ugly and mean. They are usually cruel and nasty, even their most loyal supporters. What I never understand when watching such a movie is why anyone would be tempted to follow a disgusting creep like Voldemort. The problem with evil is that the real life is not necessarily ugly. It can look very beautiful. Chinese knew this better than Hollywood. This is why traditional Christian art tended to depict Satan as a gorgeous hunk. This is why it's so difficult to resist Satan's temptations. It's also why it's difficult to deal with fascism. When you look in the fascist mirror, what you see there isn't ugly at all. When Germans looked in the fascist mirror in the 1930s, they saw Germany as the most beautiful thing in the world. If today Russians look in the fascist mirror, they will see Russia as the most beautiful thing in the world. And if Israel look in the fascist mirror, they will see Israel as the most beautiful thing in the world. They will then want to lose themselves inside the beautiful collective. The word fascism comes from the Latin fascist, meaning a bundle of rot. It sounds like a rather unglamorous symbol for one of the most ferocious and deadly ideologies in world history, but it has a deep and sinister meaning. The single road are very weak, and you can easily snap in two. But however, once you bundle many roads together into a fascist, it becomes almost impossible to break them. This implies that the individual, a thing, and no consequence. But as long as the collective sticks together, it's very powerful. Fascists therefore believe in privileging the interests of the collective over those of any individual. They demand that no single road ever dare break the unity of the bundle. Of course, it's never clear where one human bundle of road and another begins. Why should I view Italy as the bundle of road to which I belong? Why not my family, or the city of Florence, or the province of Tuscany, or the continent of Europe, or the entire human species? The milder form of nationalism will tell me that I can intend have obligation toward my family, Florence, Europe, and the whole of humankind, as well as having special obligation to Italy. In contrast, Italian fascists demand absolute loyalty to Italy alone. Despite the best effort of Mussolini and his fascist party, most Italians remained rather lukewarm about putting Italy before their famiglia. In German, the Nazi propaganda machine did a much more thorough job. But even Hitler didn't manage to make people forget all their alternative stories. Even in the darkest day of the Nazi era, people held on to some of backup stories in addition to the official one. This became plenty clear in 1945. You might have thought that after 20 years of Nazi brainwashing, many Germans would be utterly incapable of making sense of their post-war lives. They had put all their faith in one great story. What to do when the story exploded? Yet, most Germans recovered with amazing speed. Somewhere in their minds, they maintained the story about the world, and no sooner had Hitler shot a bullet through his brain than people in Berlin, Hamburg, and Munich adopted a new identity and found a new meaning of their lives. True, about 20% of the Nazi gladiators, the National Party leader, committed suicide and did about 10% of the generals. But mean that 80% of the gladiators, 90% of the generals were quite happy to continue living. The vast majority of the card-carrying Nazi and even rank and file SS members neither went insane nor killed themselves. They went on to become productive farmer, teacher, doctor, and insurance agents. Yet, even suicide doesn't prove absolute commitment to a single story. On November 13th, 2015, the Islamic State orchestrated several suicide attacks in Fari that killed 130 people. The extremist group explained that it did so in order to take revenge of the French Air Force bombing of Islamic State activities in Syria and Iraq, and in the hope that France would be deterred from carrying out such bombardment in the future. In the same breath, the Islamic State also declared that all the Muslims killed by the French air force were martyrs who now enjoyed eternal bliss in heaven. Something here doesn't make sense. If the martyrs killed by the French air force are indeed now in heaven, why should anyone seek revenge for their deaths? Revenge for what? Exactly. For sending people in heaven? If you just run, then your beloved brother won $1 million in the lottery. Would you start blowing up lottery outlet in revenge? So why go rampaging in Paris just because the French Air Force given a few of your brother when you won a ticket to paradise? It would be even worse if you did manage to deter the French from the carrying out further bombing in Syria, for in that case, pure Muslim would get to heaven. You might be tempted to conclude that Islamic State activities don't really believe they must go to heaven. That's why they are angry when they are bombed and killed. But if so, why do some of them strap on explosive belt and willingly blow themselves to cemeteries? In all likelihood, the answer is that they hold on to two contradictory stories without thinking too much about the inconsistency. As noted earlier, some neurons are just not on speaking terms with one another. 8th century, before the French Air Force bombed the Islamic State stronghold in Syria and Iraq, another French army invaded the Middle East in what is known to posterity as the Seventh Crusade. Led by the saintly King Louis IX, the Crusader hoped to conquer the Nile Valley and turn Egypt into a Christian borough. However, they were defeated at the Battle of Monsoro, and almost all Crusaders were taken captive. A Crusader knight, Jean de Joinville, later wrote in his memory that when the battle was lost and they decided to surrender, one of his men said, "I cannot agree with this decision. What I advise is what we should all let ourselves to slay, for thus we shall go to paradise." Joinville commented drily that none of us heeded his advice. Joinville does not explain why they refused. After all, these were men who had left their comfortable courthouse in France for a long and perilous adventure in the Middle East, largely because they believed in the promise of eternal salvation. Why, then, when they were but a moment away from the everlasting bliss of paradise, did they prefer Muslim captivity instead? Apparently, though the Crusades fervently believed in salvation and paradise, at the moment of truth, they opted to hedge their bet.